awful lot of finger pointing. I showed you that one whiteboard graphic previously. There's a lot of moving parts, and oftentimes we weren't able to pinpoint exactly what was happening. And so that brings me to the kind of the next point, which is, pinpointing things, trying to isolate slowness or bottlenecks or issues, often finds most of us playing detective. We do try to reverse engineer. We do try to quantify and figure out what went wrong. What our software allows you to do is very quickly isolate and then hand off the task of remediation to the actual functional group that should be in charge. If it's an application issue and we see this, we hand it to the app folks. If it's a network issue, etc. If it's storage, that as well. Could be something in the core data center with our hosts or our hypervisors, which is rare, but it could be. We'll hand the task off to them for remediation. Another process, or another part of the process when we talk about assessment and then migration to any new technology, whether it's cloud or VDI or client hypervisors, is what do we do about all that goodwill and stuff that's on users' desktops? This is something I think all of us will hear more and more about in the coming year. That's my prediction, at least for 2011, which is, okay, I've picked the right users. I've done an assessment. I've got a lot of really good measurements about what they do and how they do it. I've used that measurement to create a really awesome design. I've made my correct vendor choices. And now I need to move 100, 500, 1,000 users onto that new stuff. Well, I don't want it to feel like Groundhog Day. What do I do with all of this stuff, the settings, the personalization, their data that was on that old machine? It's a little bit different than, if any of you folks remember, kind of the first phases of server virtualization, where we could P2V a server. We could literally image it in place on a physical piece of hardware, and we could translate that physical server into a file, right, a virtual machine, and away we went. Well, the challenge with desktop is there might be stuff I want to bring across, and there might be stuff I don't want to bring across. And oftentimes, at least today, organizations are moving from Windows XP in the physical world and considering really moving to Windows 7 in the virtual world. Well, what counts? What do I want to bring over? Certainly I'm not going to bring the operating system. I might not even bring all of my applications because I'm going to perhaps change the way I deliver those into the environment. But all of the uniqueness that makes that user's desktop, I want to bring that over. And of course want to capture as much or all of their user-authored data. The content they actually have created and consumed as employees of my company. That's got to come across. And so we've done some thinking about that as well, and so one of our solutions helps play into that. And again, we think of it as kind of a life cycle. I hit on this a little bit before, but it's something I keep coming back to, which is that with visibility, with good data, comes good decisions, or at least comes the avoidance of really, really bad decisions. I'm a fairly simple fellow, and so I believe if something works, we do more of it, and if it doesn't work, we do less of it. So I break it down into kind of the two blue buckets. So what I believe a proper assessment should be, and what our software enables you all to see, is number one, what do you actually have out there in the desktop population? I mean, I know you've probably got Excel spreadsheets with either lease termination dates or kind of asset tagging, and that helps. But when I talk about what do you have, I want to know everything. How many users, how many desktops, what ages are those machines, how large are the hard drives, what's the processor type, how many monitors are attached to them, what's the resolution, what's the aspect ratio, any USB devices that are dongled off of that machine. I want to know that irrefutably, because if I do that, and then I also started looking at, well, of those provisioned resources, what are the users actually consuming? I mean, what do they do when they come into work? What apps are they using? How much CPU are they consuming? How much memory? How much I/O? How many page faults? And not only for them and their desktop, but by each application. I mean, I want to know everything about what the usage pattern is, what apps do they use in conjunction with what other apps. And I want to know this for each and every user, but I also want to know it holistically for the entire population of desktops I'm taking a look at. Because it's our belief that if you know irrefutably what you have out there, and if you know mathematically what users are consuming, you're in a really, really good place to determine what you need to do, or what you need to buy, or what you need to change. Sometimes the answer is nothing. The technology that's available today isn't ready for those specific users. Majority of the time, there are solutions that are available today in generally available format that solve real problems, that help you, create that reliable computer system that we're all trying to get to. And so I think it's our job out here as manufacturers of great software tools, and CentriNet as one of our top partners in the country, to help you with that red box. They're the subject matter experts on storage. They're the subject matter experts on application delivery. They're the subject matter experts on networking and Microsoft operating systems and all of the different application options that are available to you. We're not. We're just a software tool that exposes that. And so it's kind of like a tool that's in the hand of a great practitioner is much more valuable than just a tool by itself. So I know that slide seems pretty simple up here, but it's also, I think, very, very powerful. And we've gone through this process nationally, whether it's organizations with 100 users or organizations with 400,000 users. And the answer is always the same, which is, I can't believe I was considering making vendor choices or architecture choices or use case scenario choices without having this type of data. It's been very refreshing, and we're glad to contribute to that space. I'm going to get a little technical, but not too technical, and just explain the architecture of our software, because I think it will give you a good sense of visibility into how we're collecting, what we're collecting, and why you should care. So our solution, our software, really has three moving parts. And so I'll go through them kind of in a 1, 2, 3 fashion. Moving part number one is a virtual appliance. It is a hardened Linux VM with a Postgres database on board, which simply means that as a virtual appliance, it doesn't care what it runs on. And it runs on your hypervisor of choice, on your hardware of choice, in your data center. So all of the measurements that we take from around the environment are written to the database in this hub. Data never leaves your environment. It's your data. You own it. You keep it. We're just going to show you how to get access to it. That's moving part number one. It's also fully integrated and talks to Active Directory. So all of your user accounts and organizational units, security groups, etc., are all in there. It also talks to the majority of the hypervisor management platforms out there, because oftentimes we will want to correlate and collect host-based metrics if you've already started deploying or playing around with virtual desktop or virtual server. So I'll explain that in a little bit in greater detail. Moving part number two are these little green keys that you see everywhere. And this is an agent. There's actually two flavors of the agent, and it kind of depends on your preference in terms of which one you would like to use. The first flavor of the agent is like any standard agent. It is a small little MSI or EXE. It's about 12 megs in size. You can distribute it using any software distribution method. And it is literally a piece of software that you install on any desktop, laptop, or virtual machine that you would like to get information from. We also have a virtual or zero-touch version of the agent, which is awesome and fairly new, which is the same bit of code that sits in the netlogon location and streams into memory of that local machine. So there's nothing to install, nothing to touch. The majority of the larger assessments and monitoring that we're involved in, and I would probably say 5,000 and above, do prefer that method simply because it's easier to get a lot of software out there quickly and take a look at a really, really large swath of any user population. But necessarily, software does relatively the same thing. The one thing we do miss with the virtual version of the agent is login delay. So the agent's job is to do two things. Well, it's actually two and then kind of a third somewhat magical thing. And the first two things is its job is to inventory and interrogate, sounds progressive, but inventory and interrogate every desktop that it lands on or laptop that it lands on. So that those two blue questions of, well, what do you have and what are you using, are the first thing it endeavors to answer. What is the configuration of this machine? What is this machine and it's used for consuming for resources? How much CPU, memory, disk, and I/O does Tyler consume when he uses Outlook? How much network am I using when I'm using Skype, etc. All of this information is written to a little cache file that stays local on that local user's hard drive until, at a predetermined time and a predetermined frequency, it's sent back to the database, to the hub, to be written to. And the other and third interesting thing that the agent does, whether it's the virtual or the full-blown version of the agent, is it puts